Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to the From Foster to Blank podcast. I'm so excited to have Austin here. Ran into him on Instagram after hearing one of his new released songs and loved it so much. I have to admit, I accidentally confused you with another Austin who is a Christian musician. And I was like, where's this guy been? And then I was like, oh, this is someone totally different. But how cool because Austin, my friend now, is a former foster youth, and that's where I think I got thrown
Okay.
off because I was like, "Oh, you're a former foster youth, correct?"
I am. Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Okay. So the other Austin, I don't know. I don't know if he is, but I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that about him." And my husband's like, "These are two different Austins," and I was like, "Oh, well, my bad, my
Mm.
bad." But I am so excited because the song that I heard, I was just like, "Oh, yes, it is a Christian faith-based song." That's yes, I love it. And so what I want you to share about is who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. Who I am, I'll give the bullet points as you mentioned. A big piece of my story is I'm a foster care alumni. I grew up through just a lot of craziness, brokenness. Ended up in the foster care system as a teenager. Ended up, having my opportunity for unification terminated with my biological family. So that meant I was accepting as a teenager. I'd be in the system till I aged out for the rest of my life as a 15-year-old. And yeah, by the grace of God, dots connected, and ended up moving into a group care program, a group home with WinShape Homes. And so I'm giving that context just because that's a part of kind of where I am today and the work that I do, kind of a big full circle moment. But through a local church who heard about kind of what was going on with me and my story, hearing about, me being in the system and the court ruling, they came and pursued custody of me. And so WinShape is a foundation. It's the nonprofit arm of the Cathy family, the Chick-fil-A Cathy family. So Cathy started the WinShape Foundation in the 80s, and there's various arms and branches of the ministry, but one of those was WinShape Homes, which started out as a group care, group home, really just ministry to care for foster children with different unique needs. And then fast forward a number of decades, that evolved into actually launching into becoming a foster care agency to equip local churches and help them get into foster care ministry. So with
Mm,
all that said, I was in a WinShape home about 15 years ago. I lived there for 3 years and graduated out of the system, and it completely transformed my life. I had a deep
mm.
encounter with God and completely changed the trajectory of where I was headed. I was a very broken, very wild teenager at that time, and just the Lord completely worked in my heart. And so, yeah, when I aged out, I began my healing journey. Went to college in Georgia area, and I ended up just having a heart for ministry. Always have been musical in a musical family. So got into doing just worship leading and music ministry at my church, which eventually evolved into more. Became worship pastor. The past decade, I've served at the local church level in a worship pastor role, then into more of an associate position, which um, looked like many things, a very ambiguous job description, but it looked like overseeing the creative arts and production, but also part of our executive team, and then started teaching as well with our team. So fast forward a little bit further, I started doing a different itinerant ministry along with music and all those things at the same time. And alongside that, adjacent to that, in 2019, I actually launched a marketing agency, a digital marketing agency, where I
Mhm.
was servicing mainly other artists and creatives, helping them market their music and get it heard, get it out there, and that grew. Ran that for about 5 years. So this weird conglomerate of all of these things, I got connected with WinShape to start doing these different events where I would share my story, encourage local churches and pastors, and eventually that led to coming on staff with them in
Mm.
2023. And so stepped out of local church ministry. They came and said, hey, like we have this vision for really wanting to see local churches equipped into caring for vulnerable children and families. And answering the James 127 call, of caring for the orphans and the widows. And so um, I was very surprised. I thought I was going to be, on staff at a church for maybe the rest of my life, at least for the next 5 years or so, foreseeable future. So God surprised me with that. Because, I was
Yeah.
leaning heavily into doing the marketing stuff adjacent to pastoring, but also doing my own music. So a lot of things at once, but that's kind of brought me into this new space in this season. With working with
Mm.
WinShape to equip local churches for foster care ministry. And then alongside that as well, as you mentioned, I am an artist. I'm a producer.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we live in Atlanta, and I really just I'm focusing on releasing my second album right now. Just a lot of
Mm.
songs around the themes that are inspired from my story, which is healing, restoration that the gospel brings. So, um,
Mm.
yeah, that's a spitfire, little background, but also where we are today.
Okay. Ooh, there's a lot to unpack here. So one of the things that you mentioned, and I'm sure you've heard this before, and I know we hear it a lot on the foster care community side, but a lot of foster youth have said, like, I'm not an orphan. So can you explain, as if you're coming into that conversation as a pastor, as someone who's experienced foster care, to you, what does that word mean? And why
Yeah,
would it be important for people to understand that foster youth are not actually orphans, but we do need to take care of them?
right. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so yeah, I think like even getting back to a foundational verse that the church uses is the James 1:27 verse. And back during this time when even this epistle was written from James, like that term orphan was kind of that overarching statement of just the fatherless, of just the vulnerable young people in need at that time. That could look like a lot of things. But very often at
Mhm.
that time, it even just meant that you were fatherless. You could even actually have a mother. Like, so that it's a very, very broad term. So I'd say even
Mhm.
pulling it into today's context, clearly, like we see that term as like, okay, someone who has no parents at whatsoever and
Mhm.
like is up for adoption. There's even that terminology legally an orphan. So there is some difference there. But I think for us, when we say like as the church, we are called to care for orphans, I think what that really means is, we're called to care for vulnerable children who have
Mm.
needs, and specifically that can look like serving in foster care, which we know is a temporary service. You're getting into the work of foster care, saying, "Hey, I'm here with the heart of reunification in mind. We're here because we want to see this child have a safe, loving home where
Mhm.
they can be here for a season, whether it's 3 months, 3 years. The heart and the goal is reunification, and so yeah, that's an interesting question because you know technically not all foster youth are orphans, and
Yeah.
technically when they go up for adoption, but even that word, as it's not it's being used less and less frequently, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question,
It
but
does.
yeah.
And I think it's a really good conversation to have because it makes me very frustrated that we have to like really spend time on a word when we could be spending
Yeah,
time in action. But I
yeah,
understand like but a little bit of, from my story is that I don't have parents. They're both alive, but they're not like they haven't been there since I was 13. And
yeah,
so, through a lot of counseling and a lot of healing and a lot of prayer and a lot of just like crying it out with God, there's that moment where it's like, Lord, like I'm technically like an orphan of alive parents. They're not, they don't want me. And that was something I
yep,
had to really work through and understand that there's actually a lot of foster youth out there who it really is like their parents just dropped them off and left. And it's heartbreaking because you're just like, oh, okay, that does happen. And then there are situations where it was neglect, like they didn't have food and an ability to financially care for them, and that's why the kids were taken out. There's a lot of, and I like that you said vulnerable children. And I
yeah,
think that is a term like we could say like as someone who doesn't have parents who are being able to take care, you said our job as foster parents or the foster community is to temporarily step in to help, and these are
yeah,
vulnerable children that we should be looking out for. But I think it gets messy when we start getting to words and we say, well, this word offends me because of, But I think that there's also for I don't know if how you felt about this, but I feel like for myself, because you said reunification was not, it did not happen for you. So can you really
No.
quick explain what reunification is for someone who might not know what
Yeah.
that term is?
Yeah. So reunification is, um, I mean, it's both. It should always be the old overarching goal of foster care. Foster care, I think you have to get down to defining it, right? It's a temporary service. It's a temporary way to engage with vulnerable children, and even engaging with, the biological parents who may have had their children removed for various reasons. But reunification it's kind of on the nose. It's like we want to see children that have been separated by the state from their parents for any reason. It could be neglect, it could be abuse, it could be a handful of reasons. It can be because of a death in the family. It can be, there's a long list, but usually the most we see is neglect and abuse. And we can get into the weeds of even defining what that means. But
Right.
yeah, it's the goal of seeing those parents go through whatever process that the state requires to provide a safe and loving, sustainable environment for that child to get out of survival mode, to thrive, to have their basic needs met. Oftentimes, that's what's
Mm,
happening when they're removed from the home. So yeah, reunification is always the goal and the posture that we take when we encourage people to engage in this work, recognizing that
mm,
that when you care for a child, you know, as bittersweet as it is when that reunification process happens, that is always the end in mind. Like that's the prayer. Like
mm,
ultimately, we want safe care for a child where they can grow and
right.
thrive. But
Right.
the undercurrent of that is always going to be like we want this kid to be with what God designed for them, which was for them to be with their parents. And we know that
Mm,
grace abounds where the ideal doesn't always exist, and that's where we get to step in. But our goal is to see God bring wholeness to entire families. So it's not just the child, but it's saying, hey, like we believe that parents are broken people, like, and they deserve
mm,
God's grace and mercy, and they deserve the restoration that comes with the cross. So we have to have a more robust, holistic approach
yes.
to stepping into foster care, and I think that's really what we want to encourage churches into as well. So long
I love
long
that.
answer to a quick question, but yeah, reunification is always the
Yes.
goal, and yeah, we want it to happen.
I love long answers. That's just how I work too. But I think that it's really important for people to understand that reunification is the goal. It's the intended goal. And there are horrible situations out there where foster parents have sabotaged bio parents. We know that exists. But our goal as the community, as the church, is to say we're going to do right by the family, right by the child, and our goal is to reunify. If that's 3 years, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it might be, we're going to do what we need to do. And then when reunification is not able to happen, we need to be able to step in and love this individual holistically and support them
Yep.
holistically and not just say, well, the 3 months is over, the 3 years is
Right.
over. Like we're here to be that family in a different route. We're not replacing, but we're an extension of the family.
Yep.
And I think that it is very it foster care is very messy. And we know that faith is can be messy too. But it is good that we see what our calling is as a faith-based believer is to say, hey, our job is to take care of this adult or this child or this young person who doesn't have that. And I think
Yep.
the hardest part is when you've aged out of the foster care system and you start attending church and you don't have a family. That is something that has always been a battle for so many. Is well, I don't have a family to go home to, and to be able to even say like, hey, even if you're after 18 years old, if you need a family, church, this is where we get to be that family.
Yep.
And I love that you are definitely going out there and talking about that. So when you started doing music, you said you started sharing your story through music. Now that is a very unique thing, as most people, I mean, I love worship music, I love singing songs, I love doing that. But writing is very hard, especially when you're being vulnerable. So when you're writing the songs that you're writing, like how did you get started with that? What does that journey look like for you?
Mhm.
And then what kind of can you walk us through like how do you make what something messy into a beautiful song?
Mm, that's a really good question. I guess, the origin of music, interestingly enough, was actually in, my family growing up. I grew up a very unique aspect of my story is that I was in proximity to the local church almost my entire life, which, part of my story is that, I think speaking to the reality that there are a lot of broken people and Christians and believers in churches that
Yeah.
go under the radar, a lot of messiness that goes under the radar in the midst of church
Yes.
communities. And so we were all across the board. Both my parents met at a ministry school in Colorado. They were very broken people. Dad dealt with drugs, alcohol his entire life after he got out of the army. Mom
Mm.
had her own trauma, just both two individuals who have a lot of trauma coming together, by the time
To
I'm
have more
four, they're
trauma.
divorced. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. It's just,
yeah.
it feeds off one another. So they're broken people who it yeah, created lots of messiness. And then my father ended up just becoming a very abusive person. So I went through a lot of that growing up. But adjacent to that, in this weird juxtaposition, my dad was a very gifted music minister. Like he actually led worship at churches oftentimes, but it was just inconsistent, off in and out. A very interesting thing is his gifts and what people would call the anointing made way for him very often. But there was not that check and balance of a parallel of integrity and character. And even I would say
Mm.
from church leadership and people who are willing to get close enough to actually see, behind the veil and have some accountability too. So that, with all that said, because I try to it's hard to throw that in there and people are like, wait, your parents were Christian church people and you ended up in the foster care system. For some people, that's a big gap for them to understand. So trying to give that context. So with that, we were constantly in and out of churches in an unhealthy way. My
Mm.
family was, we moved so many times, probably between the time that I was like 4 years old to, 14, I probably moved over 20 times from different states, all
Mm.
across just inconsistency, more often than not living in government housing. We were super poor, like all of it. And so parents divorced, so back and forth between all of them, both parents married, divorced again. Like, so it's
Mm.
just a whole mess. I could spend a whole, hour just giving you the backstory. But in and out of churches, was exposed to that as a young man, fell in love with music. I think it was in me. Musical family. My sister, very musically talented as well, and had a number of
Mm.
siblings as well. So it was just a part of the culture of our home. And beginning as in sixth, seventh grade, the first instrument I ever picked up was a harmonica, and just had an ear for it, and they would let me play in this small little church with worship,
Mm.
and I'd hop on the harmonica and I'd play. And so then self-taught, started playing music, fell in love with it all the more, and always knew that it was gonna be part of who I was. I mean, as a foster kid, going into foster care, I remember, I as cliche as it sounds, I showed up with a trash bag of clothes and my guitar that I bought at a flea market in my first foster home.
Mm.
And and so as a 14-year-old, I was like, I used music as an escape. I used it to process
Mm.
pain as a teenager. Um, and so I was songwriting even when I was a teenager. Not great songs, but I was working that muscle. It's always been a part
You
of
wrote Baby Got Back, huh?
yes.
I
Yeah,
knew it.
that
I knew
was
it. Called it.
the vibe. So yeah, eventually it's
Yeah.
just become a space of, I've always known I wanted to do it. I think that I jumped head first with just such a heart and a deep burning passion for the local church that I kind of set it on the shelf for a while and picked it up a lot later. If you'd asked me when I was 18 years old, like, hey, when are you going to put out music? I'd be like, next year. And it took a much longer journey. But the beauty of that
Mm.
is I feel like I was able to kind of sit and grow before trying to, I think so many people want their voice to be heard before they have something really to say. And I wanted I'm
That's a
just
good
grateful
point.
for I'm grateful for like the time that it took for me to be able to do that. And in that process, I learned to produce music as well. So I'm self-produced as well, and collaborate with different people. But so that's kind of a backstory there of like music. But I think with songwriting specifically, it's an ever evolving process. I wanted to, I mean, The first record we did, a friend of mine that we produced, we ended up doing a fundraising campaign where we actually went to China and we produced a worship album in the language of Mandarin, and we
Oh,
raised money for
cool.
that adjacent to my first album. And so, anyway, so I
That's
wanted, so
crazy.
I I bring that up just to say because we went around at okay, I started out with a moniker of like pop music that was just singer songwriter, weird stuff, experimental
Yeah.
project, and I kind of got like, you know what? I think I kind of got this tug on my heart, realizing that I really wanted to record and put out my worship music under my own name and just kind of embrace
Mm,
that part of me.
yeah.
So we ended up partnering with a some missionaries out in China. We ended up raising money for this project because Mandarin is the number one most spoken language in the world. Sorry, I'm giving you a full circle
I
backstory.
love it. I'm like, this is cool. This is really cool. Continue.
So we ended up so this was the first my first album that I put out in 2022 for context.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing a campaign raising funds for that, and so COVID happens, all of this. So I say all this is we did all these projects and I didn't get to put out music until 2022. All of that to say, it took forever to put out music. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that I did. And then we put out this faith-based album that really is just focusing on the beauty of the gospel, the beauty of becoming a new creation,
Mm,
and I would say what inspired those songs is a lot of my healing journey, but they're more just about who God is and who He says we are.
mm,
But I would say the songs that I'm writing in this season are those messier songs that kind of actually share the story of my life and some of the brokenness that happens, some of the discussion around
mm.
abuse and mental health, and wrestling with the seasons of God. Um, I'm trying to believe in and recognize that you're a good God, but at the same time experience pain and suffering. And honestly, it's the
Mm,
exploration of the fact that the gospel is not necessarily an opportunity to escape suffering, but it's actually learning to suffer well. It's not the absence of troubles, but it's recognizing that Christ is always with us in the presence of our troubles. And so those songs
yeah,
are unreleased, but those songs are being recorded right now.
I
And
love that.
the first batch of songs are really just straight up worship and praise songs because I felt like that's really how I wanted to start this journey. So that's a
Yeah,
super wraparound answer for you, but I think it's a season of also feeling ready to embrace
yeah.
that part of my story and put it on display and know how I want to share it as well.
I love that. So we're gonna kind of work from the last thing you said backwards because I think we're gonna
Okay.
spend a little bit more time on something you said. So the first thing the last one of the last things you're saying is like embracing the story, but making sure it's the right season. And I hear you because there's two things is that there's some pressure to be like, I know I have a story to be shared and put out there, but there's a heart posture that needs to happen. And it's not a you want everyone to know your story just to know your story, but there is backlash for sharing our stories fully in its integrity. There is hard things that we have to work through emotionally when it comes to sharing the right things. And I, as a speaker, I do a lot of speaking events. And one of the things that I recognized very quickly is that going in, a lot of people will go in to share their story and they share the levels of abuse in detail. And it's so much trauma. And what I started recognizing a lot of people were not really listening. And it wasn't that they weren't hearing the person's stuff, it was that they were spiraling in their own trauma. And so it's a
Hmm.
very dangerous game to play when you're saying, hear my story in its, authenticity, but it's not really authentic. It's you're trauma dumping on somebody who has
Yeah.
experienced trauma and you're
Yeah.
actually hurting both you and them. And so very
Yep.
quickly I was like, whoa, what do I want to put out there? Now, when I was in it at
Hmm.
19, 20 years old, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have been like, here's all of the abuse that I went through. And people were like, oh
Yep.
my God, because I did it to people. And now I'm like, look, I was in the foster care system. I was abused on multiple different levels. I was just in an abusive environment. That's the reality of what I went through, but I'm not there. I'm not staying there. And I think that is so important, like you said, is like you have a voice, but is it the right time? Are you in the right season to share that kind of detail? And I like that you said you're embracing your story and telling it a way that you want to tell it versus just saying, here's all the mess. Here's all the
Yep.
gross. Here's all the ugly. That's part of your story, but it's not who you are. It doesn't have to define how you say it. But there is a caution that we want to take when we are sharing, not just for trauma dumping, but also that there are people out there who are going to gravitate toward you and try to use you in the wrong way. And I've seen that happen a few times. It was where people try to trauma bond, but also too, there are people out there who try to use you off your story. And it's not about connecting to you as a person. It really is to be like, hey, come in, be vulnerable with me. And then we see people go unchecked and they become abusive. And it's like they're starting to use your insecurity against you. And you're like, whoa, how did you know that was my insecurity? I'm like, because when you were not filtering what you said it. And so
Mm.
it's there is a season, and I think it's okay to, you don't have to share everything, but also at the same time
Yep.
too, you can share it the way that you feel is going to have the right impact, not just an impact. So I'm hearing you
Yeah.
say that, and I'm like, yes. I wish someone had told me that when I was 20. But what I was told in hindsight, and I think this is the hardest part about the faith-based community where we both kind of grew up. I was
Yep.
in a Christian household. I wouldn't even say Christian household. I would just say that they applied the Bible to abuse, and that was it. I don't even know. I don't know where the heart posture was, but it is very difficult to be in a faith-based community and say, hey, I'm being abused and this is where I want to spend some of our time. Is it is There are so many people who have dismissed it, and like you said, they were close to you, they should have seen it, and they ignored it.
Hmm.
That's heartbreaking for me. So what can we tell our fellow Christians, like, hey, if someone says they're being abused, what would you tell them to do?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think depending on, what is shared out the gate, um, you know, there is, I'll start by saying there is a threshold by which pastors and ministry personnel are even equipped to deal with a lot of things regarding abuse and even regarding trauma. I think that one of the biggest gap in you know church staffs in general is that there's a lot of really great pastors who have great gifts at different things, but we need more professional counselors. We need people who actually understand the mental health
Yes.
space, that
Yes.
understand the science. So there's that whole clinical side there that I see the global church moving toward at a more healthy pace. I really hope to see that
Mm-hmm.
just more valued and recognized. So there's that. I think there's the whole reality that churches need to become trauma informed and trauma aware. And we hear that word and we think we all know what it means. But there's a deeper place to recognizing trauma, even down to, being able, as a church staff, being a mandated reporter, and knowing what are the signs and the things you have to look for, just like a teacher at a school. My wife's a high school teacher and they're
Mm.
mandated reporters and they have to understand the signs and the different things. So there is the just knowing what to look for and be aware of. And then what do you do? Like at what level and what step? How do you go about reporting and who do you report to? So there is a whole like stateside system that's important to like engage with. But I would say, if somebody comes and says, hey, I'm being abused, whether it's somebody in a relationship who's an adult or whether it's a child who's,
Yes.
bringing that to your attention, I think there's two different ways to go about it. If it's a child, you're a mandated reporter and you've got to contact the state, you got to contact someone on the local level. And, there are, it's different from a child saying like, hey, and vocalizing certain things. Like we have a responsibility when that happens there is this area where you're you got to get training to identify the signs of abuse if a child's not saying something. So that comes down to just recognizing that, like, I think churches, there's an opportunity to lean in there. We, with our clinical team at WinShape, that's something we do. We do trauma trainings and we go into churches and help
Good,
pastors when we
good.
start a foster
Yes.
care ministry. We want them to be equipped to know how to care for those who have been traumatized, but also it helps you see the signs in other areas. So yeah, I would say that the number one thing you don't do is ever brush it, off. And you have to take it seriously every time, even if you feel like there's prior history with the person who's dishonest or who wants to abuse that or whatever it is. Like there's not instances where that doesn't happen, but you always have to give the benefit of the doubt and then act in wisdom on how to approach that. And so yeah, I would say where I've seen uh different lay leaders and individuals, other pastors or different positions on staff at churches where they've not really done a great job is, I think, choosing to let it breathe and not take action when they should, or lean in and inquire more. And honestly realize that if abuse is happening, it's not necessarily a pastor's job to figure out the solution, but it is the pastor's job to connect what's going on with the person who can do that, whether it's somebody on the state level, a caseworker, a local, you know what I'm saying? Like in Georgia, it's
Yeah, yeah.
DFACS services. So again, that's a very long answer, but I
It's
think that the
good
biggest thing is to lean in, take
because
it seriously.
it's 100% because you said two key things. The first thing that I'm hearing you say is like it's not a pastor's job to decipher if it's true or not. That's not what
Yeah.
we're asking. It is absolutely the pastor's job to say, this is where I can help. If a family says that they don't have food, we step in. If a
Yep.
family's child says, hey, I got hit across the face, you step and say, DFS, get involved. Because that is not for you to find out if it's true or not. It's our responsibility to report it because we don't
Hmm.
need to investigate it. And I do see that in the church a lot. I do see that, and I'm going to probably get hated on because I'm going to say this. I see that a lot in women's ministry where it's, well, let me give you advice about your marriage. Let me give you advice about your parents. You should go back home. I was told that several times, like, you need to go home and apologize to your parents. You clearly pissed them off. And I was like,
Uh,
like, and they didn't know a lot about my story because I didn't share it. But it allows when I think when someone steps in, the second thing I'm hearing is when someone steps in to try to play investigator, what happens is that's how abusers are able to fly under the radar is because they build a relationship with someone who is trusting their word instead of the child's word, especially a child's word. And they're saying,
yeah.
oh, children have an imagination. And I hear this a lot, especially like in a couple of my reels that I've shared is people are like, wow, children have a really, really imaginary fiction that they put in their head where it's all imagination. Children don't imagine abuse. They don't. It has to be planted to understand that that's abuse. Now, do they lie about it? Yeah, we've seen that happen, but we've also seen parents lie. And when a
Yeah.
pastor comes to a parent and says, "Hey, are you, your child said that you hit them?" Oh, dismissed. Oh, your child said that someone sexually abused them. Oh, we'll just, it was a miscommunication. Don't investigate because you don't, that's not your job. Your job is to report it. Let DCFS, out in California, it is also called Department of Family Services. So DFS,
Yep.
let them handle it. They're trained. They know what to look for. They know what to ask. Even they have had issues where they have gone to the parents and believed the parents over the kids. And I know that my both my parents were really good at being able to manipulate people. They
Yeah.
both were in church leadership. They were both within ministry as well. And I grew up in a church, and it was very heartbreaking to hear from people who walked alongside of them, who were very close to them, say, I'm so surprised you guys went through all of this. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't be because you were very close to them. And there were times that when things were raised in question, you guys said that wouldn't be them. And I think that's the hardest part is when I actually had someone message me who went to one of our old churches, and this person said, I heard something happening and I addressed your parents on it. And they told me that that wasn't the situation. But then I never saw you guys again. And I was like, you should have reported it.
Hmm.
And that was it. But what they did was they tried to investigate, were lied to, found out. My parents left and we never saw them again. But then the same person recently re-messaged me again and was like, hey, can you stop sharing your story? It's too much. And I was like, maybe there's some guilt there, but also too, yeah, it's a lot, but we need to talk about it. People need to know that just because you're a Christian, just because you're on leadership at a church or in ministry of some sort, and being a worship leader or a preschool director or whatever job they hold, even a volunteer, they still mess up. And sometimes it's to that extreme, it's that bad. So it's discouraging when we hear people who are claiming Jesus and going, yes, Lord, are the ones going home and hurting their children. But it does happen. And if we're trying to play investigator, or we're trying to lean in and not understand what trauma-informed training is, why it's important just to bring it to the right people, know where we start and end in our role, and where someone else has to
Hmm.
start and end in their role, so we know who to go to, we actually do more damage than good when we try to do that. And it is such a needed conversation, because I think the church is starting to understand what real mental health is, and trauma informed training, but there's still a lot of
Yeah.
people going, I don't know what to do with this. I don't
Yep.
know what to do
Yep.
with that. So that's where it's so cool to see that you're getting involved and being like, hey, church, here is a way to be active. And so many people with the foster care community, and the church community, think that the only way to help is fostering. What are some other ways that you would point people to if they're like, hey, I'm not qualified as a foster parent, or I don't think that that's what I'm
Yeah.
called to? What are some other ways that people could help, outside of just being a foster parent?
Yeah. Well, when we go into different church spaces, we come in just, I think, with the heart and posture saying that we want to establish a culture here. We're not here to, like, kind of push a campaign and tap out a few individuals here. We're here to actually create a community that says we're going to own this, which looks like a staff saying we're going to own this, which looks like a senior pastor
Mm,
saying we are going to preach about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about the biblical invitation that's here. So we come in with a, hey, if we this is what partnership looks like with us. There's other people and agencies where we do have a massive need for homes. We want,
yeah.
last year, I think it was last year, there was one point in the state of Georgia where 500 kids were staying in hotels because there weren't enough homes,
Mm,
and the state moved very quickly when the media heard about it, and it's good for them. They moved fast to figure
yeah.
out different solutions, but so there is just a bottom line need. We need homes. There's a foster care crisis
Yeah.
happening. We need homes. We want believers to step in because we believe that this is a tangible display of the gospel. We want to make the gospel beautiful by caring for vulnerable, children. And so
Yeah.
so we want to come in and we want to create a community. We want to create a culture that's there. So we say, hey, we want foster parents. If you feel called to this, we want to teach you, train you, equip you. We also act as a child placing agency. And
Mm,
so there's a lot that goes in with that. But the next level is just relief parenting, or as you know, is respite care, where
I love
people
that.
can come
Yes.
in and a part of being a church is once you have, three or four families that say yes to fostering and they get a placement, they need help. They need people who can, babysit
Mm,
on for date nights or even for entire weekends to care for these kids. And you have to go
mm.
through the similar training and licensing to become respite, but that's a massive need as well. And it's often we see people step into respite slash relief parenting to even dip their toe in the water, to just get in proximity
Mm,
to children and realize that these are just
yeah.
kids. Like, they have unique brokenness that may have happened to them, but these are just kids. And then often we see respite families become actual foster parents. And
Mm,
so then there is that demographic of people who really want to be a part and provide care. And so we develop care communities in churches as well. Part of
Mm.
our team, our strategic partnerships team, we have one of our staff members. Her name's Emily. She's a care community coordinator. So we go into the church saying, from the get go, this is what partnership looks like. It looks like helping identify a lay leader or a staff person who's going to oversee the care communities at your church so that once you do have foster
Mm.
families, you have a community of care that can care for them. And that can look like providing meals when they get a placement.
Mm.
It looks like inviting people and saying, hey, there are so many ways you can engage. We have accountants reach out and say, hey, I can't foster, I can't do relief parenting, but I can do this foster families taxes for free. So it's really
Oh my gosh.
think about what is it that you
Yeah.
uniquely can offer, and then maybe you don't have something like that, but I think when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, what I say is that I think foster care is the most slept on social justice movement. I think that it is a massive issue and need. It's a social crisis. We see the ripple effects of foster care, into all different kinds of systems. And so I believe that it's the most left on
Mm.
social justice movement. Why is it that this is not a viral discussion? Why is this
I
not
know.
being
I
talked
know.
about?
Yeah.
And so I would say that that's another aspect is really inviting people into using their influence, whether it's, 10 people or 10,000 people, using your voice and influence to begin to talk about this, because there is a conversation happening in the evangelical church in the West around the hot
Mm.
topics and the different things. If you ask somebody 15 years ago about what is human trafficking, then oftentimes that would be people would be like, well, I don't know that term. I don't know. But what you saw was this massive movement that began to happen where that massive need, that social justice need, that thing on God's heart, it broke through that ceiling of the conversation that was happening in the church and
Mm.
became, End It movement. It became these various mobilizations that got the church
Yeah.
into this needed work. And so I think about foster care that way, is I believe that there's an opportunity in this season for us to break through, first and foremost, that ceiling in the Western evangelical church. I don't
Yes.
think it's broken through that ceiling quite yet, because
No, I
it's
agree.
it's because it's not sexy, it's not glamorous, it doesn't grow your church fast. It's not a church growth engine. When you plan a
Yeah.
church, it's not like, what's a part of our 5-year strategy? Foster care ministry. No, it's like, let's you know, do a building campaign, let's have good production and all of the things. And, so it's not to knock that down, but it is to say that, like, there's a gap here that I think God's bringing, just a, I don't know, purification to bring his heart back. And I see the church
To
stepping into
the
that. So
vulnerable. Yes.
yeah, and so I would
Okay.
just say it's awareness. We invite people
Yes.
to raise awareness, whether it's social media, whether it's person to person. So that's another big need, is like everybody can do something. That's what we believe.
Yes. And so I want to drop some numbers because this is what's shocking. I'm going to share a quick story and then drop some numbers. Um, so I took in five of my siblings, and then I'm going to try not to like lose my mind because this is like, it just hit me like how bad this is. At the same time I took in five of my siblings, there was a campaign to raising a sponsorships for children in different countries. Both are equally needed. I, in the same conversation, was condemned for taking my five siblings in by the same person who then asked if I was sponsoring a child and condemned for not sponsoring a child. And it breaks my heart because both are needed. And it breaks my heart because it was like at that moment of support, just something so small of just saying, girl, that's hard. Someone
Mm,
literally said, that's stupid. You shouldn't do that. But are you sponsoring a child? Are you really? And really, the conversation was, are you really going to spark change for someone who absolutely needs it versus someone who, and it was just that whole conversation. And I
hmm
left like so disappointed because it was
hmm
just like, Lord, what is happening in our church when we look at a family and we, like you said, like they might need a meal and we go, they signed up for this. And it's like, pause. Yo, guys, like, let's mow their lawn. Let's go to every foster family, make sure their lawn is up to speed. Ask if we can do laundry for them. Like you said, what can we do? Maybe we have a cleaning business, or maybe we have $50 that we can spend on cleaning or food for them for a night, just to give relief. But when we look at the numbers of how many kids are in foster care, there's over 400,000 in America in foster care right now. In kinship care, where this is a family member stepping in or a friend stepping in to take a kid, there's over 2 million children in kinship care. Every year, 120,000 kids are aging out of the system, meaning that they're turning 18 or 21 and they are out of the system and out of their placement, and they have nowhere to go. And so many of us, like you said, like, are just like, come worship Jesus and leave. And there's so much more that we can do. And the big one is we need mentors. Like, and I know that that's what changed the game for me. And I shared this with the pastor of my church, where I said, if it was not for this community, I would have emotionally drowned. And I'm going to not even be dramatic, drive my car into the side of the freeway, because I was so depressed at what I couldn't, like, I just didn't understand. And if it wasn't for these adults going, there is a young woman here, for something's going on. We don't need the whole story, but something is happening and we need to show her who Christ is. Then stepping into that and being in the same community, able to step into taking my siblings in and being loved and supported, even though I had horrible conversations, there were still a lot of people who said, do you need a couch? And every room there, we went from a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 500 square foot apartment with 6 people to a 4-bedroom townhome because someone made a call. Every single room was filled with furniture because somebody else said, Denisha needs help. Someone else gave food. Christmas trees for 2-3 years. We got a Christmas tree because someone said, that is what I can do for you in a season of, I don't know what to do. And sometimes you're right. We think of these things as like these massive things where we have to save everybody. And it's like, maybe our focus is just one family as a church, one family, one foster youth as a church. Maybe we're called to do more, but it makes me so sad that I'm with you on this, where it's like, I do think that it's coming, where there's going to be this breakthrough. And I think that that's why I'm like actually so excited. I didn't know you did all of this. So I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And I'm working with an organization as well. We're creating foster care content because a bunch of families in the church were like, we don't know what we don't know. And so I get to work with them and partner with them and be like, here's the content. And there's this concept that I'm going to be talking about, and I think we need to really hone in on, is foster like Jesus. That is what we need to do. It's biblical. Like, what does that mean? It means to be the hands and feet to Jesus, like Jesus did, to whoever needs it. If that's someone across the world or someone in our own backyard, is we just need to foster like Jesus. We might not be able to be the person who fosters this young adult, but we can be there to say, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? Can I tutor you? And I know we can do amazing things when we go together. But I think sometimes we do look at it, you're right, it's not this glamorous thing. It is a very heartbroken thing that we have to sit with. But that's where Jesus sat. He sat with the heartbroken. He mourns with us. And that's something that I think more people are starting to go, oh, I just didn't realize it was a big thing. I thought it was just a couple places. I don't really know a lot of foster care. I don't know a lot of foster families. And it's because a lot of us are moving forward going, we need to share, we need more help. We need to share. We need the churches to move. We need to share. This is ridiculous that we don't have the resources we need for families, both bio and foster. So I want to connect more with you on the side, because I love what you're doing, and however I can support, let me know. But I think this is such a great topic, and it's so great that you're doing so much with it. But then you also get to be an artist. So I love that. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit, and I'm gonna ask you.
Okay.
How do you define success?
Yeah, I mean, a very an interesting question. I think a difficult one to answer, but I would say, starting out just kind of broad macro, I would define success as bearing more fruit of the Spirit in my life. And that's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. It's the attributes of Christ, and it's the inner working of the Spirit. And so to me, that is success on this side of heaven because you know that you can gain the
Mm,
world and lose your soul. You can have a, 500,000 followers, you can have millions of dollars in the bank, all of that, and still be a miserable person. And so,
mm,
if you'd have asked me a decade ago what I thought success was, I would have had a different, idea in my mind of priority there. But I would say that that is like the more like what feels like a hyper spiritualized response, that
mm,
looks like my most important relationship, which is my marriage, which is the number one thing that reveals to me that I have so much space to grow in that area, that I have a lot to work on when it comes to bearing those
mm,
fruits. I get to work out that muscle the most. So, and then it's obviously, other spaces with it's just becoming a disciple of Jesus, a better growing disciple of Christ is to me what success looks like. And so that's, I would think on a spiritual level, that's the most important. And then, um, you know, uh, because I've had seasons where I've worked really hard and have achieved, uh, you know, things that look great from the outside looking in. And at that same time, what paralleled that was honestly an absence of those fruits of the spirit in my life, and wasn't happy having reached what the world would define as success. So that in this season, I will say is my desire to go after and to continue to go after when it comes to what is and isn't success for me. I think
yeah.
that's always going to be the undercurrent, but practically, I think there is a seasonal reality too when it comes to, you can define success as like you're going after something and setting a goal, and do you achieve that goal? So I do think that there's these
Mm,
practical realities of what does that look like in my job working in child welfare. We
mm,
we have a goal of seeing churches equipped, people partnered, of seeing children placed, of seeing families licensed. To me
yeah.
that is success. But I would say in the past year, Denisha, success has really when I feel the most successful is when we get a text message or an email and it has a child's name and it says, you know, John Doe, age 5, was just placed in one of our homes
Mm,
and is now staying with, to me, that's when I feel the most amount of success, is that we see a church that we partner with, that we equipped, a family that we trained and licensed, and a child that we placed in their home. That's success. And and then yeah, there is the music space where I am, you know, to me, I've really wanted to redefine success in that because, um, you know, I think for me, success is consistency in this season of writing and
mm,
releasing music, um, and and I think telling my story in a way that glorifies God, but also invites people to tilt their heads a little bit and to look at,
mm,
I think suffering differently. I think even I
yeah.
want I want to represent the beauty of the gospel to people
Yeah.
through whether it's songs, writing, through speaking
Mm,
opportunities. Um, and so if that looks like, blowing up and signing a big deal or something, that's every artist's idea of success, or
right.
even maybe just staying independent, being massive and doing that and being able to tour and do that, that would be amazing. I would love that. I pray those big prayers, and I would say in this season, there's
Mm,
been an opportunity to see my audience grow and that form of ministry reach people through these songs.
yeah.
But I would say that can't be, the end all be all of what success is and isn't. It's got to be, to me, success is it's the DMs from people or the messages that I get where they say, "Hey, you know, whatever it is, a story." I mean, I remember there's this girl in Scotland. We went and did a mission trip with our church,
Mm,
and I was feeling kind of down about not how my debut album did, but I wanted it. You kind of, every artist kind of, when they release music, they feel like they're kind of playing the lottery, and they're like, maybe something will take
yeah.
off, or maybe maybe the algorithm will blow this up magically. And it's like, God, please make the algorithm do something crazy, and
I know. I feel
just
it.
being
I feel
honest,
it.
right?
Okay,
Yeah.
let's be real. Yes, because the same thing as a speaker and an author, because that's how
Yeah.
we're compared as successful. Absolutely. Let's be
Yeah.
real. I got
So
it. I got you.
there's the vanity metrics side of that,
Yeah.
right? But then there is like, how does the Father see you? And
Mm,
so I think that like, so using that as an example, my album, I had an idea in my head of how I wanted to do. It didn't do that. The first album I released. Remember, we just went on this mission trip, working with one of our church plants at the church I worked at the time in Scotland, and it was after I led a worship set and shared a message that evening. This young Scottish girl came up to me and she was kind of crying, and she was just like, "Hey, like," she's like, when I went to uni, she's like, I had like crippling anxiety. And she said I would have to walk what's called the
mm,
Royal Mile in Edinburgh every day. She said, I just did really bad in crowds. She's like, I could not, I couldn't, she's like, I had a social anxiety I never knew about. She's like, because she lived way out, in the Highlands where there was not big crowds. And she moved to the city to go to university. And it hit her like a ton of bricks that she had this massive social anxiety. And she told me that she started every morning when she would walk through the crowds of people in Edinburgh. She'd put her headphones on and she'd play my album, Behold and Become. She said she played on
mm,
repeat for months. And she said, and it like was this beautiful escape. And she said after a while that anxiety just went away. And
mm.
it's like
Yeah.
that was the moment where I'm like, okay, maybe, this song didn't, maybe this album didn't, win an award or go gold, but like that is
Yet.
success. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes to, and I hear you on that, because so I'm working on a documentary right now, and we're going to be talking about in this, highlighting the barriers that foster youth go through with education and homelessness. And my story
Mm.
is going to be weaved in and out, and I'm like, the dream is to be like it picked up on Netflix or Hulu, and like they're like, here's all this
Yeah.
money, because it's like what you want is you want as many people to see it and hear it as possible. But there's also the God factor, where God's going to let it go where it needs to go. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's the one person. And
Yep.
literally, so I have a second book that I launched in 2019, and I self-published it, and it sold like 15 copies, and that was it. And I was like, oh, that's a little disappointing. It wasn't very good. Format was all weird, but it's one of those things that you're just like, oh, I thought that was going to go really differently. And as a creative, it messes with you internally. And so you're saying, like, look, you can dream big dreams and have big prayers, and God's going to say, I'm going to land it in somebody's hands that needs it. And
Hmm.
it's the mindset of the one. Like, that's where I just keep thinking, I'm like, look, if this
Yep.
documentary only touches one person, where they're either
Yeah.
going to become a foster parent or someone who's going to be in the community who's like, I'm going to rally for foster youth, perfect. Or if it touches a foster youth that says, hey, there's resources out there for me and people who care, that's what I want. Would I love for it to reach more? 100%. Would it be really cool? Absolutely. But I have to step back and say, okay, God, like, that part, that's up to him. And it is
Yeah.
hard, because we do want it to be successful. But you're saying, like, the success wasn't that it launched well, it was that you got to have this conversation with a young woman who was released from anxiety. And
Hmm.
oh my gosh, as someone who has experienced anxiety before, I would give anything to have that released. And I have multiple times, like, done all the things I needed to do, and it would come back, and then I recognize that I have situational anxiety. I don't have a chemical imbalance. I don't have where I'm all the time anxious. It's just when situations and I feel out of control, that's where the anxiety comes in. And so worship has grounded me. Reading my Bible grounds me. Going to church grounds me. Community grounds me to where I don't feel lost. And that's where, when I'm out of sorts, I start to realize the anxiety comes back, and I go, okay, what have I not done this week to like ground myself? And I think
Yep.
that's the hardest part. But worship has been the one thing that has always been, and that when I heard your song, I was like, oh my gosh, like, had no idea. And now I know why you're different, Austin. But I'm so glad I ran into your music. And I'm in California, you're in Georgia. Y'all, that is like on the other side of the country. Like, both of us are
It's a
not on
long
the
way
same
away.
side. So California girl got to hear Austin, Georgia. And I think that that's really cool because that's just how God works. The reach is different. It goes in the hands of the people who need to hear it the most. So when you're saying that success is not defined really by numbers, money, and things, it's you have to kind of reevaluate that as a creative all the time and say what is
Yeah.
successful about this. You, I hope it wins an award one day. Well, we don't know what's going to happen, but what we can still hope for those things and pray for those things and
Yeah.
be disappointed when it doesn't happen. But what you're saying is don't stay there.
Mhm.
Look at what was successful. What was the good that came out of releasing that? I love
Yeah.
that. All right, so last question. If you had any advice to give to anybody on anything, what would it be?
Yeah. Well, I would say that when it comes to our own pain and our own suffering, um, realizing that like there is opportunity for healing and restoration through the gospel first and foremost. So, when it
Mm,
comes to if you're hitting an obstacle with your mental health, if you're hitting an obstacle in your life, when it comes to just you feeling that opposition of your internal reality, you don't feel love, joy, peace, you don't feel that fruit of the spirit. My, simple suggestion is that I believe that Jesus is he's the way, he's the open door to experience those things. And so my my suggestion would always be like, hey, like Jesus is the answer. He's the way, the truth, and the life. Um, but I would say that seek to discover the beauty and the truth of what the gospel actually is versus what the Western church oftentimes presents it as. And I think if we can do that, then we'll discover um, that discipleship to Jesus really does lead to abundant life. So I know it sounds kind of cryptic, but I think to simplify that language, it's just that um, realizing that when Jesus tells us to take up our cross and follow him, that looks like the way to abundant life looks like laying our life down. And to follow Jesus, we have to have a cross in our hand, and that looks like serving others. It looks like giving your life to care for people around you. And when we do that, that is success. That is the way to happiness. That's the way to see the fruit of the spirit work in our life. And yeah, I mean, I would say I could go on and on. I could get up here and preach a sermon, but um, it would be easy just to say, hey, like get in church, find a good Christian community, um, and I think everyone should do that. But I would say like seek to discover the true Christ, and that looks like doing the work yourself and reading the Gospels and saying,
yes,
who is
yes.
God? And so to put a cap on that, I would say that Jesus is the perfect image of the Father. He said, I came to reveal the Father. No one has fully seen the Father until now. And he says, if you want to know what the Father looks like, look like me. And so I would
Mm,
say, question anything that you think about God the Father that you don't see in the person of Jesus, and and discover who that Jesus is, discover who that God the
amen.
Father is, and it will lead to what Christ tells us is the abundant life. In John 15, he says, remain in me, let my words remain in you. Because apart from me, you can't bear fruit. But if you stay attached to me,
Mm,
talking about foster care, talking about attachment, we see attachment and how
mm,
important it is to have trust built relationship and attachment. That actually is what God's heart is for us. Have attachment to Christ and God the Father,
amen.
and that's what I suggest. I suggest that.
I love it. That's beautiful. And that I think that that is a great place to leave it. So we thank you so much for being here, Austin. This was so good. And I think um, I'm excited to see what God's going to do through your music and through your advocacy and just through the community that you get to be a part of. And I'm cheering you guys on, and I'm here to watch. I'm just excited to see what God has. Thank you guys. If you guys want to reach out, please listen to his album. Let's make it blow up. That would be really cool. But yeah, let's listen to it. It is a very good album. I loved it so much. When I heard the song, I was stopped in my tracks. So you guys got to listen to it. And then you guys can follow him. All the content will be in the description below. Have a great